It says we're live. Are we live? Can you confirm for me that we're live? Can you hear me? Can you see me? If you can, drop a comment in the comment section below. Thank you all very much for joining us today. Fascinating discussion. This conversation, I think, is going to be a great primer for us this week to really think about what the bot is about and what's going to happen here in the coming months and years, especially as AI Day 2 is fast approaching. And for today, I have a great panel to discuss the amazingness of what could be Tesla bot. Please welcome in Bradford, Scott, John. Thank you all very much for joining. It's a pleasure. Really appreciate you guys. I keep forgetting I have music on. Let me turn this stupid music off. I always do the music on for the beginning. I'm like, look at my production value. And now I'm like, I forgot I had it on. So maybe the way we'll start is, what we'll do is, Bradford, we'll have you go first. This idea was really, it originated from one of the Twitter spaces you hosted on Saturday around the Tesla bot and what it means to job creation and, other angles from that perspective. But before you even do that, if you don't mind, maybe give a 30-second introduction so that folks are familiar with you and your background. And then as people, say John and Scott, you guys start adding to the conversation for the first time, take 30 seconds to introduce yourselves, and then we'll just allow the conversation to flow from there. So I'll give the microphone to Bradford to set the stage for us, and then we'll take it from there.
Awesome. I'm Bradford Ferguson from Halter Ferguson Financial. I'm going to share my screen real brief. I am a financial advisor. I do have a position in Tesla, so do my clients as of this date. I'm trying to share my screen. I want to share this one. And here's our disclaimer. I'm going to stop that. It's at hffinancial.com/disclaimer. And looking forward to the discussion today.
Awesome. All right.
Yes, and I'm Scott Walter, and I'm currently with a company called Visual Components. I've been with simulation software for over 30 years, so my background is simulating robots and factories and understanding how they work and showing how they should work. So when I saw the Tesla bot, I was very intrigued because there were a lot of things in there that I saw were kind of needed for the future of manufacturing, and been trying to reverse engineer what they're doing and get an idea of how it's going to impact Tesla. Because like Brad, I am also a Tesla shareholder, so I should get that out there. A little bit of a disclaimer, and also an FSD driver. So, and I am really pleased to be on, as you see, there's pictures that are up here right now. Basically, this is what we call the Farzad Gallery.
Welcome to the gallery.
Cool.
John,
there you go.
Yes.
Happy. Yeah, I guess as long as we're introducing ourselves here first. My name's John Gibbs. I teach at the University of Georgia and also president and CEO of Artomatic and Technologies. And I guess the way people probably know me is actually from the Dr. Know-It-All YouTube channel. So there you go. That's the super compressed 15-second version.
Nice. And I'm Farzad Misbahi. I have a YouTube channel. Okay. I guess people would know if to click on me. I think full disclosure, we all are Tesla investors. Some of us have FSD beta. I don't know if all of us do, but some of us do. So, but we're going to be as objective as humanly possible. We may have the tiniest bit of biases because I think all of us are relatively pro Tesla. But the reason why I'm hosting this panel is because I think the three gentlemen with me are, I really enjoy the work they do, and they can be very objective about thinking about the future, especially the implications of Tesla bots. So again, thank you all for joining us. And Bradford, let's set the stage for us.
Sure. So I decided to host a Twitter Spaces on Saturday. And people are talking about how the Tesla bot's going to destroy jobs and all these things. And I was like, okay, well, I think Tesla bot's going to create a lot of jobs for a long time. And maybe eventually they'll figure out AI and general purpose, and we'll all be out of a job and have to live off of the robot's kindness or whatever. But so I was thinking about this, and not all of my thoughts are original. Some come from the community. But someone said to me, maybe Tesla bot will actually be easier to figure out than autonomy. What Tesla can do is autonomy has to work like anywhere in the United States. I live in the capital of roundabouts in Carmel, Indiana, and it struggles in roundabouts right now. It was too conservative, now it's too aggressive. But hopefully with the next version it'll be great. But anyways, what Tesla can do with the factory is they can limit the environment, limiting the corner cases. You don't have to worry about cars whizzing by at 55 miles an hour and potentially killing someone on a blind left, like Chuck Cook's blind left. You can really control that environment. You can actually, maybe you could work with humans, but maybe they could decide to have the Tesla bot in a room where there aren't humans, because humans can create corner cases by doing things that are not expected. So really what Tesla can do, the hard part is controlling the robot, which Boston Dynamics and others have shown can be done. Xiaomi had a demo very recently with the robot coming out on stage and handing a flower to the CEO. And Tesla just has to figure out, okay, how do we incentivize the robot to do the behaviors in the factory, and what do we have it focus on first? And I think Tesla's main problem right now is a shortage of labor. They've been doing one shift of labor, one shift for Model S and X in Fremont for a long time. The floor plan for Giga Nevada was this huge area, and they're only doing like a quarter of it that they're supposed to do. And they ran into a shortage of labor because like people don't want to live out in Reno, Nevada, or not enough people. And they're hiring for Giga Texas, they're hiring for Germany. But ultimately, let's say all the jobs that they hire for Giga Nevada from here on out are robots. You're going to need a lot of humans to support those robots. You're going to need people to train the robots. And so I was just thinking about all the jobs that could be created for a while. And it's like a big, massive problem. And I think ultimately, when you have an economy that's not very efficient, and you clean out the arteries, I kind of view the economy like an organism. If you can clean out the arteries and make them more healthy and move more efficiently, like the Tesla bot could do with the shortage of labor, help addressing that, then the organism can thrive more than we imagine. So, we've been through various periods of high innovation. People thought that, with certain farming equipment, that what do we do about all the farmers losing their jobs? And we went from 95% farmers to 5% or whatever now. It might even be 2% in the US. Mm-hmm. And the same problem with wagon rights and blacksmiths when the automobile came out. And not all those people found jobs with Henry Ford and others. They found other work. And what technological innovation does for us is it solves major problems, and then we can begin to dream about new problems and solve new problems, and it raises our standard of living and all that. So I'll stop there for now. I got on far long enough, but
no, I appreciate that.
Digging in with you all.
Yeah. Scott or John, any sort of thoughts around what Bradford just proposed? Anything that sparked your mind? Go for it.
Yeah, I'll go. The first thing I want to do is kind of dispel the myth that robots destroy jobs. It's always been out there ever since the industrial robot first came. Go way back in time, all the way to the Jacquard loom, and this idea that they were taking jobs away from people. And that's never been the case. It creates new jobs. There is a certain amount of job displacement, but you can remember there is a transition. It's not like it's from one day to the next. And what Bradford said is that everyone says that they're going to destroy jobs, and the first question I wrote down there is like, well, what jobs are they going to destroy? Tell me what jobs are going to destroy. And no one can really point out to that, because the actual fact of the matter is, if you talk to the American Welding Institute, they're going to tell you in the next 5 years there's going to be a shortage of 500,000 welders. Where are they coming from? We're not destroying those jobs because those jobs just don't exist. The people aren't there because of attrition, because of retirement, because they can't backfill that fast enough, and because no one is really interested in going into that profession. So it's very, very hard. Plus the fact more companies need welders. So it's outstripping the supply. So the only solution is that we have to offshore these things. There are plenty of people maybe overseas willing to do that, but that means we have to start doing our assembly over. And if we want to onshore, we need to bring this technology in there. It's not going to be destroying jobs. That is an absolute fallacy that you're going to see anything like that. It's basically doing the jobs that people don't want to do anyway. And that's what we're going to see. So if you want onshoring, if you want higher quality, which is another reason why you do robotics, is that it's very difficult to do the same mundane task again and again, day in and day out, day in and day out. So that's kind of my thoughts. I've got plenty of other thoughts, but I'll turn it over to John. But otherwise, I'll dominate the whole conversation as usual.
I want to make
Scott, I have a mute button. Don't worry. I'm kidding.
Okay, good. Use it.
I want to make one quick comment. Like, I think in order to dispel some fears, Tesla is going to have it in their own factories for a long time.
Right.
If you put these things out in the world, then people can put all their fears on it, and you start it in the factory, and then you kind of go from there. Go ahead. I'm sorry, John.
Oh, no, it's okay. I was actually just going to chime in because I happened to be watching a keynote that JB Straubel gave. Gosh, it was a few days ago. But anyway, I was watching it this morning. And it's very interesting because he talks about the fact that they don't have enough labor. They don't have enough skilled labor. They don't have enough engineers in the right areas, but they also just don't have enough manual labor. And the Reno factory that Tesla has is a really interesting a case, or whatever you want to call it, because it's in a place that not enough people want to live. And Austin seems to be a hot place right now. I think far as literally hot right now, but it's a very good place to live. But the next factory that they create, if it's in, I don't know, someplace in Tennessee or something, and not everybody wants to go there, they're going to have labor shortages. So yeah, it's great to think about the fact that this could be taking jobs, but what it might be doing is filling in jobs that just simply aren't there right now. So I think that's a very useful way to think about it.
Yeah, and the welding example I gave is just one industry. I mean, we know what's 1 million in trucking, right? A shortfall there, and you just keep on going down and down. All these different places where help wanted signs are out there, but no one's showing up.
There's a huge shortage of jobs, and businesses are lowering their standards for employees that they accept, so they may accept people with drug problems or more of a criminal history. And while those people deserve work, it's not necessarily ideal for the business. So like robots help with that. And yeah, go ahead, Farzad. Did you
actually? So I kind of fall on the other side of the fence on this issue.
Let's hear it.
And so I definitely, so the standpoint that I come from is, if there was a variable or a lever that companies can pull where they can have labor that's going to be twice faster than the average human at a fraction of the cost with zero HR overhead, who in theory could do all labor, all physical labor in the next, say, 10 to 20 years potentially, why would anybody work those jobs? So that's what I would like. So what jobs would get created that the human will be able to transition to when all those jobs are gone? So how do we think about that?
Well, I think we know it because every time you have these different generations, like, immigrants that come in and they are doing, really hard jobs. And the whole idea is that they are trying to find a better life for their children, to educate them going out there. And the first thing I tell their kids is, don't do this, do that. We want you to move up the economic ladder. So that's constantly there. And what we're seeing is that with the Tesla bot is, again, you're saying that this is not the career you want to go into. Find something different, prepare for something a little bit different. And there's going to be a transition period there. So there's enough time to do it. And it's very clear there is a lot of, we were saying on Saturday, the term low-hanging fruit. So the Tesla bot's going to be going after that low-hanging fruit very, very early on to get a foothold in there and start doing that. And then people are going to realize that, okay, maybe I should be doing something else, or I should be thinking of a career that's a little bit different. I have one example. Farzad, you want me to show the Optimus feeding the robots? Just so we have an idea of what we think Optimus will be doing there. So if I go ahead and do my share over here, and
and I'm going and the way I'm going to approach this is I'll be asking a lot of questions, and this is not to just put anybody on the spot. This is literally for me to learn, because I am on the other side of the fence. So I'm really looking forward to the discussion here, and I appreciate it.
Yeah. So, we need a contrarian, no doubt about it. Okay, so I think you can sort of see the idea here is that there's a world that the industrial robots currently live in. These are the orange robots over here. No humans are supposed to go in there, and the humans are basically outside, and there's an interface between the two. And so you have the situation where you need to feed products or material to the robot cell, and that's typically done by a human. And it's a very simple kind of task of just picking parts all day and dropping them in the right location and going over and doing that again and again and again. And I want to ask people out there, is that a career? That's not a career. You don't want to be doing that for 40 years. That might be like something you'd want to do in the summertime or just starting out to pay your bills. That is not a career.
Scott, this reminds me of the video with Rivian, where they showed the new factory for the first time. And there were these carts that had like 10 door panels on them, and they had humans moving those door panels onto the line. I was like,
yes. Yes. Now, a lot of that is done robotically now, and most others, but that's because they're ramping up and trying to figure it out. So a lot of it can already be done by the industrial robots, but there's still aspects where the humans go in and do those kinds of functions. And again, it's like feeding the lions at the zoo. You need to make sure that you separate those two, the people from the robots, so they don't injure one another. And of course, the one problem here is that we figured out how to do tasks, because in there are tasks that humans can do. They're welding tasks. Humans could be doing those tasks. The problem is the end of arm tooling that's been set up for those robots. You cannot just take them off the end of those robots and expect a human to go in and do it. So there's no way, if one of those robots goes down, a human can go in and change place with it. Yeah. And at the same time, the operation that we're seeing Optimus is doing here, I just took what was our original human model and swapped out the Optimus model. So that was a human running around doing that. You can't have one of those orange robots come out there and do it for a variety of reasons. One, it just isn't capable of doing that. And second, you need to make sure it's behind the fencing just for safety reasons. The idea of Optimus is to be able to fill in and do the exact same task as a human. Not to try to design an environment which is only for Optimus.
Right. Let me riff off of that idea real quick, if you don't mind. So the one statement you made, do you want me to leave this up, by the way? Was there something else that...
it's up to you. I was going to bring it down.
Go ahead and stop share for now.
It's okay. I can remove it from my end. It's all good. So the one thing you said is, so you showed that role, which is something that a human, correct me if I'm wrong, a human does today, but the bot would basically step in to do that job, right? And the question you asked was, nobody wants this as a career. I agree. Nobody wants this as a career. So the where my brain immediately goes to is in a world where a lot of existing people are doing those jobs today. Like say, and let's layer in something as well, like full self-driving as an example, which is not directly tied to the bot, but it's some sort of automation, right? And tied to the logistics and the semi-truck and those things. Say in the next 5 to 10 years time, let's say Tesla is able to solve full self-driving for semi-trailers, and they're starting to ramp these bots that are taking these repetitive, dangerous, boring, shouldn't be a career job for these people. What my brain goes to is, okay, I completely agree that there should be, say, higher quality work or more rewarding work that's less repetitious and more, I don't know, it tests your brain. It gets you a little bit more amped up than just doing the job all over and over again. But then, and I'm going to use my personal experience as sort of like the counter, is I went to college, graduated in 2009, and I've seen very many people that have tried to follow that next, like the higher job that they were looking for. They didn't just want to be like a barista or Starbucks or a warehouse worker, right? And there's a lot of people out there, a lot of people in my age group that are trying to get a bigger job, but they just don't exist in the current environment of automation. So they're forced to be in those jobs. So what I go to is, what are the mechanisms that exist after the bot and full self-driving take over, as an example, for the people to be able to find those better careers and better jobs? And that's where my sort of like the job destroyer, job replacer mentality comes in, because I haven't seen any mechanism today that's going to allow people to step in and do something more rewarding. So how do you think about that standpoint? Yeah. And anybody else, feel free to jump in. Exactly.
I'll just jump in real quick. I mean, I'm always looking at historical precedents. So pretty much every like major disruption, starting with the Industrial Revolution, you see there are people who are displaced. And I think part of it, Scott and I have actually talked about this before, part of this is a function of time too. If it takes full self-driving Tesla bot 50 years to get good enough to replace human beings, I don't think that's the case. But if it takes that long, that's a couple of generations of workers, and there will be some time for societal adjustment. I think the really big shocker is going to be if if full self-driving gets solved. I really think the Tesla bot gets solved software-wise, because it's actually a simpler case. I think Bradford was just saying that earlier today, was, it's a simpler thing to do than full self-driving, which is really, really hard. So if you solve that and it's done in 5 or 7 or 8 years, say by 2030, that doesn't allow time. I hope I didn't just die out there. Did I just cut out? Back. Yeah. Okay.
You held on time, so put it up there.
There we go. Sorry. So anyway, it doesn't allow time for people to transition from whatever they're doing right now that could be replaced by something like the Tesla bot or autonomous vehicles as well. I mean, drivers too, to a new career. If you think about it, if it takes a really long time, the person who's in the old career is going to retire probably, and then the new person just won't come and take that job. But if it happens in 5 or 10 years, it's a whole different case.
It's always been unimaginable in the past. Like, where are the farmer jobs going to go? What about the blacksmiths? So I don't think the robot's going to happen like this. Maybe the factory bot happens quicker than we think. But go back to Giga Nevada. Let's say it's producing. Let's say Panasonic gets their business in gear and goes along with Tesla for the ride, and suddenly it's 4 times as productive. Well, those are robots in the factory. You need a bunch of activity to support that. So a bunch of trucking jobs and all kinds of other things going on. You need to repair the robots. Eventually, the robots will repair themselves, and maybe Tesla will design them that way so the robots can do that. But you need people to repair and maintain the robots. You need people to train the robots, and then you have like a ton of different use cases. Like the factory, I think, is easy because it's simple. But you think about firefighting in the hills in California or something like that. That would be incredibly complex, and you would need somehow to help a robot be able to train on that and to figure that out. And probably thermal vision would help too.
Yeah. And if we go back to examples where robots are already taking over, going to the welding, Optimus was not designed to do welding. There are already robots that are doing it, and we still have a shortage of welders out there. Robots cannot do all the welds. They can do a lot of them. They do a lot of the very boring welds. So if you look at like a cruise ship, you're talking about miles and miles and miles of welds to do that. And the robots can do maybe 95% of them. And you probably want to, both for quality and the fact that it's very boring. But there are a lot of welds that are very tricky and difficult to get access to. And it just doesn't, there is no return on investment to be able to come up with equipment to do some of these welds. And that's when you need the craftsman, artisan, welder to go in there and do that. And so now suddenly you're kind of excited to go to work every day because you're not talking about having to do miles and miles of weld. You're talking about having to go something where you're really appreciated and really required. And you're going to see a lot of that out there, is that the robots are just replacing the boring stuff, and now you can move over to something else. The other problems you're seeing in labor shortages is that staffing is just very difficult. Even if you can get the right staffing levels, a lot of times they just don't show up. And so certainly you're in a crunch. And we've all seen it, that, you've gone to a restaurant or something like that, and suddenly the manager is out there bussing tables. What's that about? Well, that's because the manager, he's got to fill in wherever the labor shortage is at that point in order to keep the operation going. And so the same thing will happen to the factory floor. They're trying to figure out, what do we do? They're going to have to call someone else in, it's their day off, or someone's going to have to stay on a second shift. You've got to start moving everything around. Now, Optimus gives you that flexibility. You can take what we were showing there of Optimus feeding the robots at the zoo, and there may be someone already doing it. And the reason he's doing it is because doesn't have enough seniority to do another high-skilled job that he's already qualified to do. But suddenly now, all right, there's something going on here. We have to start moving everyone around, and suddenly he's not stuck in that boring job gets to move up. So you may actually see that a lot of workers are able to transition and move through higher level jobs a little bit faster because the robots can now start taking over what are these boring, repetitive, mundane jobs, which is really what was Elon's target all along. And I've always seen it as an engineer. If I look at a job and I say, would I do that job? Would I be willing to sit there 8 hours a day and do that job? If the answer is no, then we need to automate it.
So let me ask a question, like, because maybe this is, maybe I'm not, maybe this is just my lack of knowledge. So wouldn't that statement of there being more jobs already be true here if there's already a labor shortage? Doesn't that imply that the economy can hold more jobs, but for some reason they're not being created? So help me think through that. And like, why would that change once those jobs are not being done by humans, but by bots instead?
I think, well, first of all, there are plenty of jobs where we just need people and we don't have them because they're already over here, a lack of resources in a sense. And if we can now take those people and start deploying them over into another location and training them up, then it allows us to be able to take those things on. And it may mean, as you see that there are jobs that really can only be done by humans, there's going to be more interest in actually training those people to do those. And there already is that out there. People are constantly trying to incentivize people to go into a particular industry because the shortage is there, either to go to school or to get the certificate or do something. So you're seeing a lot of that. What it will do is I think it will actually free up more resources to take on the more interesting challenges that can be done. And that's basically what happened with the agricultural revolution. What was it, maybe 2% of the population at one point was not farmers? And those were the people who were the artists and the thinkers and everything else. So only 2% of the population could think about grand things and take on grand things. And, the scientists at those times, they were all the nobility, Mm-hmm. And then suddenly when people did not have to be farmers, now more and more people could start taking on these roles that were very exclusive for a lot of people. Mm-hmm. And so I see that as that you are able to free up resources. Okay. Why should people have to do a lot of these jobs?
Do you envision this being like, walk me through maybe like, obviously none of us are, oracles, we can't see the future, but do you envision this being a smooth transition? And this is for the panel as well. Like, don't let Scott and I dominate the conversation here. But do you see this as being a smooth transition? What's the time scale? Is this 20, 50 years, 100 years? Have you thought about that? I'm curious to hear.
Less than 50.
Okay.
It's not going to be 100. The question is whether it's a decade. And that's just all the S-curve.
I think that's the big question. And a lot of that, I really feel actually a lot of that's going to be, we're going to be given a really big hint on AI Day #2, because if they've got an actual robot that's actually doing things already, that's a pretty solid indicator that they've made a lot. If they have that, if next year's or this year's version is the same as last year, where they have a person in a costume dressed up and dancing, it's like, well, okay, that's one thing. But to actually have a real robot that can even just walk around and give a flower to Elon Musk, or, all of those basic tasks would mean that they're really far along in this process. And we could be looking at a decade.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Bradford, what do you think?
Yeah.
Bradford's muted.
Yeah, I think what would be most exciting is, not only seeing a robot on the stage with Elon or whoever it is, but also seeing the robot doing things that aren't scripted to the T. I'm curious if the Xiaomi, if it was like, timed, all that, like, it'd be cool to see the robot react to whoever they're reacting to. I think it's going to be much less than 5 years for the factory bot to get started. The important thing is for it to be able to not be such a detractor, so that it's slower than humans at first, but it can work 120 hours a week. Let's say it takes a while to be charged or it needs to be maintained. And then Tesla expands that to all their factories where regulations allow. And then after that, then they begin to sell the or lease the factory bot to other manufacturers. And then it's going to go from there. The home bot that Elon's talking about today, where you might buy it as a gift for your parents or something. I think that's a long ways away because, it says
read this
in
real
the
quick.
future,
I'll go for it.
in the future, a home robot may be cheaper than a car, Elon says. Perhaps in less than a decade, people will be able to buy a robot for their parents as a birthday gift. You think about how hard autonomy is, programming it for the home and reacting to humans in a way that's delightful for people to have is going to be very difficult. So I think it's going to start with industrial things first, and then maybe dangerous tasks, like figure out some way for the robot to be helpful with fire stations in the cities, where it can go in a building and look for living people, help the people first, and then put out the fire, things like that. So I think like the home robot is like, I have a hard time thinking 10 years out. I think it's further. I feel like Elon is casting a big vision to recruit. AI Day is about recruiting. Always be recruiting at Tesla events. So that's what I think Elon's talking about, the home. But I think Elon's also talking about the home robot because he wants to take away some of the stigma or the fears about it.
Right. Can I add two things to that? Yeah, sure. I think the one thing is that the specs of the robot, and Elon was very careful about this last year at AI Day #1, when he's like, it's small, it's light, it can't go fast, it can't pick up anything super heavy, so it's not going to pick up a car and throw it at you or something, right? I think that #1 is just regulatory wise, right? We have to, as Scott talks about, the real big robots, they have to be inside cages because humans aren't allowed to interact with them. And so to have a robot that's weak enough that a human being can interact with it in a non-dangerous way is really, really important. So I think that's important to what you're talking about too. The other piece of this that people haven't really talked about yet is I think it's actually ingenious to make it just have a screen for a face, because it's sort of like, it's like my iPhone, it's like anything can be on there. So as opposed to building eyes and a nose and all that stuff, which could be creepy looking and is also locked in place, you have the ability to, it could have, an Amber Alert could come up and it could be like, hey, look out for a car that's got this license plate, or a smiley face, or, something that says like sarcasm inside little quotes, if it does something, right? So it's a much more flexible interface. But, it's got this much, much more flexible.
Oh, face. I get it.
I know. Yeah. Interface. Get it? Yeah. But anyway, I think people haven't talked about this enough. And I actually hope that they show a little bit of that at AI Day. I think that'll be really cool. And it would help to it offset some people's fears, I think, if you had this like nice, happy kind of anime, happy eyes, big smile, something like that.
Yeah.
There was I think just to follow up, one thing is that we have a template of what this is all like, and it's future shock all over again. And that, remember what the internet did. The internet was very disruptive, and we all kind of forget that. And there were a lot of people that suddenly had to be retrained and everything else. So if you look back at that, that is what Tesla Bot is basically going to do.
Right. Do you remember? I remember purchasing things on the internet in like 95 or 96, and everyone said, you're crazy. Your entire life savings is going to be taken and all this, Now who goes to retail stores, brick and mortar stores anymore? So it was very disruptive 30 years ago ish.
The fears for financial advisors was the internet gives access to free information. So why would anyone need an advisor? But like now we have too much information and people need help.
That's why you need an advisor. Yeah.
Yeah. I think the internet example is actually pretty interesting because the way I view the internet, it's a tool that allows commerce to be done much quicker and without the human having to leave home. So I can understand, like, it's very intuitive for me to understand why the internet could really allow way more people to be able to just have jobs and for more things to be produced, because you're removing a lot of inefficiency out of the system. You don't have to get out of your house and go to a place and then bring the thing back. You can just go online, click, or you can do a blog, or you can do whatever. It really removes a lot of inefficiencies.
We can do this, for example.
Right.
This is pretty remarkable. I mean, we're in multiple
Yeah.
different places having a conversation online. That's very cool.
Yeah. And so I definitely understand that. So the bot in a way also removes a lot of, I think, Bradford, you were alluding to this a little earlier, a lot of inefficiencies out of the system as well, by having labor that exists that is, it's basically a supplement or a creator for tasks that a human wouldn't be able to do. I think, and I'm still kind of formulating through my head with all the information you guys gave me. It's like, okay, but does that still imply that it's a net creator, not a net remover, right? So I'm still thinking through that.
Yeah, maybe 20 years down the road, and we get all this AI, and it ends up taking away a bunch of jobs. But there's going to be a lot of creation in between then.
Right, in the beginning, for sure.
Yeah. There was one line actually that from this statement that made it, I can envision that more. And we've had a lot of discussions in the Tesla community around, is Tesla going to make these bots into a fleet where you can lease it? Can you actually buy it? The fact that Elon explicitly said that people will be able to buy a robot for their parents as a birthday gift tells me that Tesla is actually very well planning on selling these units to individuals or companies instead of hoarding the labor and leasing it out to companies and individuals, which was a concern of mine. Because I'm like, okay, so you're telling me in the future there's going to be a single source of labor creation now? So Tesla's just going to monopolize labor? So I was happy to see that people can actually buy the robots. How do you guys think about that? Did that sort of spark any thoughts in y'all? Because that's really gave me a lot of peace of mind. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a great way for Tesla to alleviate monopoly fears. Is you can buy a robot or lease it. Here's the value we're getting from our bot. If you give us at least that amount of value, then you can have a bot yourself. That kind of thing. Mm-hmm. Okay. I think about training. So Farzad, if you remember training at Tesla, and you train people at the warehouse, training is very inefficient. When you're let's say you're in a small business and you have to train someone, literally you have to spend like a third of your time training them, especially if it's on a complex task. So a long time training these robots is going to take more labor, in my opinion. Mm-hmm. It's not necessarily going to be efficient at first. It's going to create value, but it's going to need more humans.
But once you train one, you train all, right?
Yeah, that's the big difference.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
I think the other piece of this is, at the beginning, it's probably going to be very highly scripted. Kind of what Scott showed us in that little animation. It'll be like, walk here, pick up this piece, move here, put this piece in this orientation. Relatively like current robots are right now. But over time, assuming that the AI is, not that it's a general AI and not that it has consciousness or anything like that, but it becomes sophisticated enough that you can just say to the robot, pick up that piece of sheet metal, feed the machine, and contact me after you've put 100 of these things in or something like that. And it figures it out. You don't have to tell it how to do it. That will be a really big jump in capabilities.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Scott, you were
going
to say something.
One thing we have to look at. Yeah, the one thing we had to look in that statement that Elon made is he said perhaps. So that's always his wiggle room, that perhaps in a decade. I agree with him that the cost will go down. And the other thing I've always been trying to think of what is the business case that Tesla is doing here. So as a shareholder, I am not really interested in subsidizing Elon's robots for Mars. That's as if looking at it as a shareholder. As an individual, yeah, I love the idea. But if you're as a shareholder, you're thinking there's got to be something in it for Tesla. There's got to be some other motivating reason. And the board and others probably would not have allowed him to proceed unless there was. So there needs to be a payback. And the other thing is there already is precedence in automotive industry to developing robots. I mean, if you go way back, GM had a group called GMR, General Motors Research, that developed a robot that's now actually part of the FANUC catalog, the P150 painting robot. VW made their own robots. Renault also through ACMA, Fiat through its Comau group. Kawasaki still does today. They make robots for their own use and also to sell outside. So a lot of these companies do that because they're looking to solve automation problems. And I think Tesla looked at it and said, we've got an automation problem. How can we solve it with the expertise we have? And they came up with it. And as you know, and Farzad, I think you would probably agree that, ROI, return on investment, is king, which is appropriate because ROI or roi is king in French. And so you have to justify that whatever it is you're doing is going to have some sort of payback. And when I look at Tesla, they never look at a payback that's going to be 10 years. Yes, there may be like a huge payback in 10 years, but they're looking usually that within 18 months to 2 years, it's already starting to show some sort of benefits.
6 months.
Yes, could be even more than that. You probably have a better idea. But as an outside observer, it's a short time scale compared to everyone else. A lot of other companies, it's a decadal kind of thing that they're going through. So it's not going to come from the sale of the robots, but it's going to come from the usage.
For sure.
And how it's able to go in and improve things in the throughput of the plants. So if they can get more going out at a higher quality without disruptions, because a lot of times, the human is the wild card in all those things. And if they're a little bit slow that day, if they don't show up, all sorts of things, suddenly production can slow down. One person can shut the whole line down really quickly. And then you have to go back and start it up again. So if you can get something in there, which is reliable and that the cycle time is spot on again and again and again, that's going to just help the bottom line.
100%. Yeah. And just FYI, Bradford, I've muted you because there was echo on your side. I'm not muting you because I dislike you. I promise there was echo. Okay. I love you. But that's 100%. I think in the next 5 to 10 years, Tesla bot is, in my opinion, is going to be a giant lever for Tesla to reduce costs dramatically per unit. It's going to be giant from that perspective. And I wonder how much of Elon's goal of 20 million by 2030 is enabled by the bot as well. Because you're thinking about what does the bot also allow you to do in a factory? It allows you to really compress areas down a lot. You don't really have to worry about ergonomics or giving a human enough space to work. All of a sudden, they've already made a lot of improvements from a robotics perspective and a body shop perspective for Model Y versus, say, Model X. So X, 33% less, or 33% of the robots needed versus those cars, I think was the figure. You layer in bot, then final assembly gets super tight as well. Final assembly is a place where a lot of humans work, okay? Boom, all of a sudden that thing gets shrunk. From my world that I lived at Tesla, I worked in service distribution. And a lot of my work was a lot of analytics, but it was also merged with process improvement, layouts, and figuring out how to best design a warehouse so that we can maximize the square footage both horizontally and vertically, so that we can fit as much stuff as humanly possible in these buildings while allowing enough humans to work in these areas. So you layer in robotics and automation, boy, you can fit probably twice the stuff in those things. And the biggest example I use for this is vertical space. So right now there's a lot of regulations around vertical space in warehouses, and it kind of differs from state to state. But in Pennsylvania, for example, you can only go 12 feet high on a stack. So say you don't have any racks and you have just what's called bulk. Say you have the fascias, for example, the front fascias of the cars came in these giant boxes. You would have 10 fascias sort of stacked in, and then we'll basically stack 3 of these on top of each other. Okay. Once you have a warehouse space where there's no humans walking around, that thing goes up to the freaking ceiling. Okay, you don't have to worry about those things falling on a person. They fall on the bot. Who cares? It's a freaking bot. Okay, so it becomes a cost question. It doesn't become a loss of life question, which is way, way cheaper. It's way, way cheaper to deal with a broken bot than a dead person, right? So that's where my brain goes to. And within that context, what's fascinating to watch is that Tesla is already extremely good at pumping out more units per facility than any other automaker. So if you take Fremont as an example, they're doing 650,000 per year out of that facility. Numi under Toyota and GM was 500,000 max, and these guys have been around for 100 years. They supposedly know what they're doing, okay? Then Tesla, their first factory, guess what? 30% more. So what's the bot going to do now? In Shanghai and Austin and Berlin and who knows, all these new gigafactories. It's going to be, they get a double whammy effect. They get to sell these things and in 5-10 years and make a bunch of money on it, full self-driving, and then at the same time they're lowering their cost structure through this automation as well.
Right.
don't know if
I
you
think
guys have
Farzad, you actually made me think about Elon's master plan part 3. And I'm actually wondering from what you were talking about if the Tesla bot's going to be explicitly mentioned as part of, because he said it's all about
Mhm.
scaling. And what better way to scale than to automate a lot of the workforce? So I actually, I mean, I have
bots would be
absolutely
great
no idea.
miners.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of things that they could do, but I'm just wondering if, like, actually will be in master plan part 3 will be to, like, scale up Tesla bots so that we can increase the labor force, like an explicit bullet point in there for that. I could see that happening.
Yeah.
That's interesting.
If you think
Yeah.
about car factories, they're still limited to the speed of a walking human. Ever since the time of Henry Ford and 100 years. So if you have robots interfacing with the cars even more, you could speed up that time, and then you can feed all that. You can have it go faster. You can have it be feeding into it, like just condensing the parts down into the smaller and smaller space. The robots, if something unexpected happens, the robots can decide to slow down the line if they want. I think so. Here's something for a robot maybe to solve, Farzad. I know there's different rules, or you're saying there's different rules for factories and warehouses. Like, what if the robot designed the warehouse or designed the factory? Let's give the robot the laws of physics and tell it what parts it can make, and it can use gravity and heat and electricity however it wants, and get us that part at the very end and do it as quick in the small space as possible and with the least amount of energy and the least amount of humans. And
I wonder if that's more, and I mean, I'm way out of my depth here, so maybe Scott and John can answer this better, but maybe I wonder if that's less a bot specific thing, but maybe like an AGI thing or like just a modeling thing, now that if Tesla's going to become the number one, if they're going to have the most powerful computer in the world in 5-10 years time, because they need that power to have Skynet with their bots. I don't know. If they need a lot of computing power to make this happen, why wouldn't they leverage that computing power?
I think that's. I would be surprised, honestly, if they haven't been using some of that to build their Giga Texas, Giga Berlin, because if you look at these things, they look like computer chips, right? They basically look like full-size, like macroscopic computer chips. And the only way that people can design computer chips anymore is with the help of AI, because they're far too complex for human beings to design them anymore. So I would honestly be surprised if they're not already doing that. Now, we don't need AGI. I want to be very careful. We certainly don't need a conscious robot to do this, right? We just need a really, really good tool. So very smart, but still just a tool. Absolutely not.
I mean, I can tell you software is definitely used to Elon's lawyers. Please don't come to my door. I'm not saying anything too important, am I? I'll just say this. Tesla has a lot of talent, and you'd be surprised just how much of the design and sort of brilliance of the company is actually people that have been empowered to do their best. Like, you'd be surprised.
Oh yeah,
so
for sure.
which is also like super bullish, because once Tesla does figure out how to leverage those softwares, oh boy, right? Like this is, you won't make the argument this is all human created,
right?
And Berlin and Austin are human created. But then to Bradford's point and your point, once they really start leveraging these super powerful softwares and tools, say in 5-10 years time for the next generation of the Gigafactory, especially with the bot in mind, right, with ensuring that we're maximizing vertical and horizontal space for the purpose of automation and robotics, it's going to look weird. It's going to look really, really, it's that Elon has talked about it how many times? It's the machine that builds the machine, what's the word he uses? The something.
Alien dreadnought.
Thank you. There you go. And then to your point, John, master plan part 3, is that going to be the alien dreadnought sort of style execution that we need to get to that massive amount of supply that we need?
It kind of sounds like that's what he's talking about. He keeps teasing that it's all about scale, so it's just a question of what that means.
Yeah. I mean, they clearly are using software, because I mean that's kind of what my company does, is that we simulate the factory, and a lot of our customers are doing that, and they're always thinking about how they could use some sort of AI tools to make it better. Right now, we haven't all figured out the best way to deploy AI in helping us design an entire factory from scratch. But there are examples that people are doing that, constantly trying to iterate and find the most optimal way of doing it. So I would not be surprised if something like that happens in the future. And as far as what Tesla Bot's going to do, I think we've mentioned one or two times this idea of the low-hanging fruit. And Farsad, you mentioned kind of the final assembly, and I would say the final assembly is kind of the high-hanging fruit right now. And when we had the tour in Giga, Texas, I like to say that not only was there low-hanging fruit, but there was fruit on the ground that was rotting. I mean,
not surprised.
What I showed there with feeding, yeah, exactly. With basically, feeding the robots at the zoo. That's one that's still on the tree. That's an example on the tree, and I was thinking, oh, they do something like that. And then when I saw what they're saying, it's like, wait a minute, that's even easier than that. It's much simpler. Right. And I'm surprised that not even automating it already, but it is something to have a human worker, just because it was easier for them to set it up than to go through the whole expense of it. Once you get Optimus in there, there's all these little applications that'll become really easy to automate very, very quickly. So that's going to happen. Final assembly gets tricky because of all the flexibility that you have in there. So, snapping those connectors in there is not something that's very easy, which is the reason why we haven't automated it anyways. We have to have the human get in there. So eventually Optimus will get there. They will probably redesign the car a little bit. I mean, already the idea of the structural battery pack and the car just kind of hanging there. I mean, it's so easy for someone to just reach up and go click, 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 as opposed to now where people are crawling in. So it may be something that's far easier for something like Optimus to do. Once you kind of get to there, now you're probably talking about a robot that is really useful at doing a lot of other things. So they're going to start simple and they're going to work their way up to the top of the tree. And when they get there, then I start thinking that, wow, you might have an all-purpose robot. And whether that takes 2 years, because that's an S curve. We just don't know where we are on it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
There's also the question of like what all is going to fit on the robot. How big does the brain need to be? So you need the robot to be able to get around and be cool with humans, be cool with the machines, sense the environment, all that. And you need it to be able to do its job. But then how much room are you left with? So there may be limits to what all it can do at once, but maybe in a factory it could do plenty. I was just watching the thing with DeepMind and the various versions of the AlphaGo, and they made this AI that not only could be the best player in Go, but it's like the best player in chess, and it can use its algo to figure out just random video games without even creating different weights for training the algo, like all with the same weight. So it's like, maybe you're right, Scott. Maybe I just take all that back.
Yeah. No, it's at first it'll be pretty simple because it's not like the robot is going to get up in the morning and then walk to work and march to the factory to get to wherever its workstation is. It's probably just always going to be there. So it only needs to know that small world, and the application will be pretty simple. So at first, I think it's just a super advanced vision system that's able to identify a part, that's the right part, figure out how to pick it up, and then what is the orientation for it, and bring it over and drop it off. So we're already kind of doing that already, just putting it into more of a humanoid form. So in some ways you might say, oh, there isn't any real groundbreaking technology there. It's just that they've wrapped it all up in one neat package for the first time that could do quite a bit. But they've got a backbone behind it, FSD, which has got so much more capability that once you start figuring out what that does, it's probably going to take off. So a lot of these things could be done. Like I say, there is probably no reason why they couldn't automate the picking of those sheet metal. It's just that it's too costly and too complex. And it's just easier done in a humanoid form today. So the best thing is just to hire a human to do it.
How do y'all think about how the bot gets trained? Because I've been, and I wonder if we see this at AI Day too. Like what is the mechanism to actually train the bot to do the actions? Like full self-driving today is a lot of like exception. Right. Human says this was a mistake. gets pushed into the neural net, magic happens, car's better, right? I mean, this is a crazy oversimplification. But
I think the first thing, and what they're probably already doing, is using that incredibly beautiful simulation engine they showed us last year. So, Scott, I'm sure will agree with this since you're a simulation guy anyway, but I have a feeling, millions of years of training are going on currently with virtual Tesla bot. But that is an interesting question. I actually have a theory about this, and that is that the digital self-management systems that Joe Justice and others have talked about, so I'm not, it's on them if they disclosed any secrets, but that
John, I hear a lawyer knocking on your door right now, bro.
it's like, shush, just hold on. but anyway, that digital self-management system is where the real key is going to come in, because it's going to instantly be able to tell the Tesla bot if it's misperforming. Right. So it's sitting there looking, it's paying attention to what's going on. And the Tesla bot, I don't know, picks up the wrong part, puts it in the wrong place, does whatever. And it's just like, oh, you lose, so it gets a little virtual spank on the butt or something, little loss function, whatever that happens to be. And so it does better the next time. But I think the very first step is obviously virtual, like just running a factory simulation millions of times.
I can think of a couple ways of doing that. One is it's right next to a worker and it kind of observes what that person's doing, kind of like the way we do it in an apprenticeship program. The other is that you inhabit the Tesla bot through VR, where you actually go in there and start moving around and do everything. But I don't think it's really going to be either of those. I think it is going to be a lot of simulation where the robot learns specific tasks. You break things down. It learns this concept of grabbing, and identifying and things like that. And then from it, you can construct a language that all you have to do is come in here and say, okay, Tesla bot, what you need to do is pick up that part there, put it over there. And then when you're done, pick up that part and the other part, then come over here, place the first one there, the second one there, step back, push the button, confirm that the clamps have closed. When they have closed, exit, push the other button, wait, and rinse and repeat. That is probably how they will be telling on the floor, because we already could do speech recognition. We can only break it down the task. And if it understands those basic little building blocks, there's no reason why you do it. So it's not going to be, we have to show it how to go over and grab it. And the reason we don't want to show how to grab it, because today robots are working in I'm talking about the industrial robots, are in a very structured environment. The part and the work piece they're working on is always in the exact same location. If they have to pick up something, it's already there. It's fed to them in the perfect location and everything else. So they just go and they repeat and repeat. And we teach those motions. We teach point by point by point, and that's very, very tedious. But how do you train a worker on the floor today? Basically, you just give them a series of simple instructions because they're smart enough to understand. They know what it needs to grab a part, and they can quickly identify, oh, the big one, the small one, the left-handed side one, the right-handed side one, come over, put it in there. If it doesn't fit in right, I know there's something wrong, and maybe I ask for some help, or I figure it out myself. So I think that's how their training is going to be broken down. It's not going to be like traditional robot programming. They certainly have enough AI to be able to do that.
I'll just throw in, Scott, that I was actually backing up several steps before where you were, because I was thinking about the virtual Optimus falling over and not knowing how to walk. Like the simulation part would be the very basic things of just learning how to actually.
Oh yeah, exactly. I mean, the whole, we don't have to teach Optimus how to walk.
Right.
Okay, it will already have figured that out in simulation. We just say walk over to there and walk back here. We're not going to be teaching your joint motions are like this every single one to get there. So it understands those high-level constructs, and then all you do is break down what the tasks are. So it really is going to be like a recipe. You just put it in front of it.
What do y'all think of this point that Hans has proposed? Like Apple's App Store, a ton of small shop developers will be incentivized to create functional programs that people can download to their bots to do specific tasks. Is this even, like, how do y'all think about that?
That would be so cool inside Tesla to start with. I mean, talk about empowerment. If you give somebody a good interface programming, so they didn't have to be a programmer, but they could do things like that and tell it. I think that'd be perfect. I know that's the way Tesla works internally already anyway, so why not? That sounds great.
Yeah. I would think eventually the bot does become like the iPhone. It's something that can't do anything yet until the app developers come in and show it all these different tasks. So you will have, and I think it's been mentioned before, someone's going to show it how to cook, how to do the laundry. So you just buy those apps and it goes in and now it understands how to do it, because that's where you get the power of parallelization and everyone else doing it. but I don't think it's quite there yet. They probably haven't figured out the API for that, or it'll be a while before they open up for everyone else to be able to say, now you can go ahead and do it. But yeah, long term, why not? Or
John,
how to play the guitar, Fazard.
I got a question for John. By the way, we're asking Farzad to play the guitar at the very end.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah, I will.
All right, we want it. We want to hear it. We want to hear it.
Oh shoot, I just forgot what it was.
It was for John.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So Tesla's going to have teams or team to train the robot, but they're going to need to be able to teach other people to train the robot, or train developers how to train the robot. Can you talk a little bit more what that might look like? Or
Well, I actually like, was it Hans that suggested that? I like the idea of, at the beginning, as Scott is saying, it's going to be too complicated because they won't really understand what they're doing yet. But I think eventually they'll create an API that is basically a non-programming one, maybe some pseudocode where you just type in, I want you to do this, I want you to do this, I want you to do this. And then the robot already has, I mean, basically like, the iPhone, it's got an operating system. And if you pass it the right commands, which should be able to be in relatively plain English, it can parse that and it can figure out. So, what Scott was saying is like, go pick this thing up, move it over here, then put it there, move it to the right orientation, and then push a button or something, right? So you could teach it to do that without having to explicitly show it how. I think in my mind, that's the huge advantage beyond just the fact that it's more human looking and can inhabit a human environment. So it can use power tools, it can use things that people already use, is the fact that you won't have to do this whole thing where it's like, move this 37 degrees to the right, clockwise, then move the wrist down 12 degrees. It's like, oh gosh, you don't want to end up in a situation like that. So I think the goal is for this robot to be able to be just given some relatively high level English type instructions.
Yes. Yes. Yeah. When we say grab something from over there, we mean that box that's full of a bunch of stuff in there and just pull one of them out. In a normal industrial robot, that's very hard to do. It just can't do it. And you have to teach it. So we just want to be able to tell Optimus, what's in that box? Just get it.
Yeah. What's the likelihood that Tesla actually shows that they've solved that piece of the puzzle and that's how they unveil the bot? They're like, hey, we figured out how to have it learn things. Like, how likely is that?
Well, they've got they've got the full self-driving thing, right? So that should be something that they can do.
I think I'd be careful with maybe. It depends on how you mean learn.
Yeah,
that's kind of a very loaded term. I think what it could do is it can learn a series of tasks or string them together, and you would just tell that these are the steps I want you to do. Just go ahead and do it, and you can do it at a very high level. And I think they'll do that. This is what I think the presentation is going to be like at AI Day. Now, James Dama has said that if the Tesla robot just kind of like walks up on the stage and goes over and shakes Elon's hand and waves and sits down, that everyone in the AI community will just find that absolutely fantastic. I mean, they will just be, wow, that is something else. The general public will say, ooh, what's the big deal? Okay. Because there's so much going on there. It'll probably be a little bit more than that. Something with someone will give instructions to the robot and people will just be milling around and moving around. So it might be say, Optimus, go up and shake Elon's hand. And Elon will just be in some random place around there and Optimus will identify him and go up and shake his hand. And, now go over to Drew and pat him on the shoulder. And he'll just kind of go over, pat him on the shoulder. Go pick up that box over there and bring it to Elon. And that box is just somewhere. And it's like, that you mean that thing over there? And they're just going to have to navigate because there's going to be people in the way. And it's going to go ahead and do that. So I imagine you'd be able to do something like that by getting very simple instructions. You would see immediately it's doing it. And they will make sure that the table is not set up to be just so that it works, that everyone is moving around. Who knows? It might get some volunteers to come up from the audience to say, oh, Elon, stand there. We want you over there just to show that it really is random.
I think we also. Oh, go ahead.
I got a question here. It's like, why hasn't Boston Dynamics showed something like this? Like everything is like pre-rehearsed or pre-scripted.
Well,
question.
they've done an amazing job with the whole like motor coordination, balance, not falling over. Look at Scott going like, but they've done an amazing job with that. But I don't think that their software chops for AI type software are up to snuff. And what I was going to say is actually, let's look at the way a car operates, a full self-driving. Do all of us have FSD beta? Anyway, so the way that operates is you give it a task. You say, I want to go to the grocery store. And obviously it maps out whatever that route is, but it's not sitting there going like in a half a mile turn right or something. It's going like in the next second do this and the next second do this. And yeah, there are layers on top of that, but the robot, if you say go over there and pick something out of the box, it's not having to process that entire task. It's like take a step. Am I still going in the right direction? Yeah, I am. Take another step. Oh, now I'm close enough. I can see what's in there. Reach my hand in, so each piece of it's like a little trail of breadcrumbs. You're not asking it to understand the entire thing as one fell swoop. It's it's doing little breadcrumbs and it's following that path along. And if it can learn those little breadcrumbs, then yeah, that's and vision is really important to this whole process. By the by, I think that's a big thing that Scott was talking about earlier. That the difference between a Fennec or something like that is that those robots are blind. They have to reach over and they assume that the thing is already there. And if it's not, then they miss and they're like, whoops, error. So the robot is flexible because it can see the world. It understands what's going on.
Yeah.
Chelsea had a great comment. Maybe you could throw it up there. It would be cool to have Optimus walk the Boston Dynamics stuff.
Yeah. That's cool. Yeah.
That's 21st century dunking on people.
Yeah. Now, I'm probably going to go ahead and step in it right now because I saw on my LinkedIn page the other day an article about Boston Dynamics. And I looked at it closely, and my first reaction was, and I tweeted it out, I said, that is not a humanoid robot. And everyone's going to go, oh, sure it is. Basically, it's an industrial robot that walks. If you look at the arm, if you look at the kinematics, you look at the wrist, there is nothing humanoid about it. It's right out of the industrial robot playbook as far as the kinematics. And if you look at it, there is no hand. There's basically a mounting plate to just put attachments on there to do stuff. So the task it's designed for is very different than what Optimus is. It's designed to do what are basically superhuman tasks. I mean, almost like going into the firehouse or going into the burning house, lifting up the burning embers so people can get out of it. That's what that's meant for. Optimus, the current form of it would not be able to do that. It's not that strong. So whatever Atlas is supposed to be for seems to be very different. The other thing is I've never figured out what is the business model of Boston Dynamics. It seems to be they purely exist as an R&D facility, and Google found that out the hard way. They bought them, and then within a year or two, they separated because they thought, oh, they've got something we can turn into a product. And when they found out that no one there was really interested in developing a product, but just coming to work and having fun all day, they kind of parted ways. And so I think there's a big difference. That's the major difference between the two is one is that Tesla is looking at a return on investment. They're not doing this for fun and games. They actually expect Optimus to do something.
Yeah. As a layman, this is very far from my area of expertise, but from the very beginning, I wasn't that impressed by Boston Dynamics because it just looked like it's a company that just figured out how to do balancing. It's kind of like a Segway that walks, right? And it's self-powered. I'm like, cool. Yeah. It looks cool.
John spit out. Okay, we got the spit tape. I've been saying that for weeks now. That the balance problem was solved basically by Segway. When everyone says it's really hard to get robots to walk, I'm like, no, balance has been solved. Yeah. And so that's exactly the observation you make is perfect.
And I'm not saying it's not difficult. This is not me shedding on Boston Dynamics. Of course it's a big thing that they did and it's great. Props to Boston Dynamics. But you're thinking about, okay, what is it useful for? Then I'm like, okay, it's useful to, I don't know, put up a video on YouTube and get 10 million views. That's how I think about it. What is the utility of the actual, and I'm not trying to be facetious here. I'm being honest. Okay, that's what they're trying to do there. So then, and then if we layer in, and this is again from my perspective, if we layer in the fact that Tesla, if they have world-class engineers and they have world-class software developers and world-class AI experts, if the bot isn't 10x the capabilities of a Boston Dynamics robot, or even 100x what it's capable of doing, what we just described in this forum, if it's able to identify things and listen to commands real time without any script and be able to make out the real world, that to me is already 100 times more than what Boston Dynamics is, which is just a balancing robot that is being fed a script and then it's performing that script, right? That's already just orders of magnitudes above. But unless we see that, then I'm not really sure what we're looking at. But I feel like we will see something like that that's going to be significantly better. Go ahead, Bradford.
I had this fear about the demo that it doesn't work for an unexpected reason. And let me ask John or Scott, like, so you have a crowd of academics or engineers that Tesla hopes to recruit, and they're going to be sitting there. And if that crowd wasn't in the simulation, I'm guessing that might like throw off the bot. Do you think Tesla's going to plan for that?
That's true.
Stage fright, huh?
Yeah, that's actually interesting that it could do that.
Sorry, I don't understand that, Bradford.
The idea that just the people in the audience, if it's operating in an empty room, right?
Oh,
think about Vietnam. So like the Tesla FSD fails in Vietnam because there's like so many people, pedestrians, there's so many people on bikes.
It has a panic attack, basically. Okay.
Like it's too much for it. And then,
a robotic panic attack. Boy, we're in 2022.
There you go.
Yeah.
You're right, actually. I mean, if they're smart, they'll at least bring in a bunch of employees and do a trial run and see if it works before they try to do that, because otherwise it could get completely thrown off.
And those employees will all have to sign a second NDA.
That they won't show.
Those NDAs are pretty strict. I mean, right, John?
I think the demo that they need to do is they need to throw an iron ball at the Tesla bot and see if it cracks.
Yeah.
As long as they're going for live demos, they might as well like just start chucking things out.
What if it like catches it and throws it back? So what the hell are you doing, bro?
And there's a Cybertruck back there and it busts the windows. So
Yeah. Go ahead, Bradford.
Or maybe it'd be rude, but to have the robot in an enclosed environment, so that it's, that way it's just reading that environment. It's not worried about the glass beyond or whatever.
Oh yeah, it could be true. I sorry, as soon as you said that, I thought it was inside of a cage and it's going like, let me out. Like this poor thing is in there. It's like everyone's just laughing at it, walking by and laughing at the Tesla bot. So, but yeah, that could be something where but I don't think that'll have the same effect if they say like, oh, it's happening over on the other side of the glass, but watch it, and you can see it on the screens. People say like, oh, that was trumped up. So I think in order to do it right, they're going to have to do it live in front of a crowd.
It might also depend upon regulations.
That's true.
And that would be what the auspices of maybe the fire marshal or something like that, or others, or OSHA. They're going to say that if you have a room full of people with a robot that hasn't been certified, they may at least do something. At trade fairs, they have to be careful also what they do with the robots. But they usually have them screened off a little bit, or they're very careful. And again, a funny example that happened at a trade fair years ago, this idea of the robots being very, very blind. Cincinnati Millicron wanted to come up with a robot that opened up a refrigerator, took a beer out, and would hand it to people. And so the engineers had it set up, and all the robot had to do was like go over, grab the handle, open the door up, go in, grab the beer, take it out, and put it down. And I think they might even have like a bottle opener to go ahead and do it. So that was working really, really, really well. But what they didn't do is they did not bolt the refrigerator down on the floor.
Oh, geez. Wow.
To grab the handle wasn't there.
Scott, you're lagging, my friend, a lot. Uh-oh.
Okay. There goes my internet. Right during
I think you're back.
Line, literally.
I think you're back.
Yeah. So the whole idea is that the fridge moved. The robot thought the door was open. It wasn't open because it completely missed the handle. It thinks it's there. It goes to grab it, and it just punches the door, and the fridge just goes flying across the floor in a trade fair. So, again, it's those kind of things that you need to avoid to make sure it doesn't happen.
Right.
Yeah. That's a good
But
point.
again, hopefully at least TeslaBot can't punch over a refrigerator because it's a little bit too light for that. So at least you don't have quite the Terminator effect of like.
See, the other thing is that it's very clear that what was bad in that demonstration is that everyone knows that when the fridge opens, the light goes on, right? Some magic thing makes this light turn on in the fridge. You could easily have tapped into that to tell the controller that, hey, if that light doesn't go on, stop. And in a trade fair, so again, it's those kind of things that you need to avoid to make sure it doesn't happen.
Right.
Right. Yeah. And of course, Optimus is going to be a lot smarter because Optimus has these sensors that will be able to determine that, oh, we've got a failure condition here. Don't proceed ahead.
Yeah. Real quick, I just want to give a shout out. Mount Hood, $5 super chat. Thank you, brother. Any thoughts on Xiaomi's human robot announced this week? Yeah, we actually spoke about it a little bit at the beginning of the video. So if you either rewind back or when this live stream ends, you go back in. It's one of the very first topics that we discussed.
I think it was impressive, but it's also it's got a little bit of the since I teach animation, I always worry about the uncanny valley, which is that thing where it's like close to human looking but not quite. It's a little creepy looking. It's got the whole hip area is freaky, and also it walks with those little tiny shuffle steps. So I start to realize just how elegant human beings are, and the fact that we can take like almost a meter a step, right? I mean, these huge giant steps, and it's we're quite elegant animals. So but if you see Tesla bot going like doing the little like shuffle like that, that's not going to be nearly as impressive as if it can walk confidently.
That's when I saw the first stills, I thought, oh wow, this looks really impressive. Then when I actually saw it, I said, that's no more than what Osmo has been doing since 2000. So that's the Honda robot. And again, those funny shuffle steps. And it reminds me of those wind-up robots I had as a kid that were able to kind of walk that way. It was the exact same things. So no, there was nothing there. There was nothing new, nothing innovative. I think what they were just trying to do is figure out whether they could put something together themselves and what the process was involved in that. So they got it up to that stage, but there's probably no new innovation.
Yeah.
What about the delicate flower or whatever?
That it was just holding the flower and putting it out there. Just
yeah.
I mean, you have to give them credit. At least they do have hands. I was going to try to share the screen, but for some reason I can't share it right. But the Boston Dynamics robot just has like, clubs for hands.
The hands.
And just the fingers and the hands. That's a whole. That is an impressive accomplishment on its own. Just that by itself.
Yeah. And then just real quick, Emerito, thanks again, man. $5 or €5 super chat. Optimus training on real world or simulation. Again, we spoke about this briefly before, but it's going to be a mix. It's going to start with simulation and then it's going to go real world. But thank you very much.
And I could just say why. One is that
please.
Of course, when you simulate it, you can get so many iterations that you learn quite a lot. The problem is the virtual world is not exactly the same as the real world as far as the physics. So the physics is an approximation of the real world. So then you have to bring it in the real world for it to go through and really understand what it feels like to pick up a feather or an egg or something else, because there's going to be something about the texture, the way it reacts, the way inertia is, friction is going to be a little different, all those things. So you need to do a mixture of both.
We're approaching 90 minutes. Maybe for the last topic, the one we haven't touched on yet, but I personally, for me, is like super important for me to understand how to model Tesla into the future is cost. So on the tweet that was sent out that Bradford shared, thereafter human and robots' usefulness will increase the earliest production scales up and costs fall. In the future, a home robot may be cheaper than a car. So I think that's the first time that I think Elon has given us some sort of indication as far as like what the potential long-term cost structure of this thing's going to be. How do you guys think about that? Where do you think it's going to start? Where do you think it's going to end up? What does cheaper than a car mean? Like, is that 50,000? Is that 20,000?
I mean, you're talking 20,000 to $2.5 million. That's a pretty big range. So I have a feeling the first Tesla bot will be cheaper than a McLaren. But
yeah. So how do y'all think about that? I'm curious to hear your thoughts.
I think about what Elon did with SpaceX. It's in the Ashley Vance biography, where there's this radio or something that's in the satellites. And this radio costs, I'm just going by memory, like $250,000. And Elon goes to one of his engineers, I think like his best one. He's like, I want you to figure out how to make it for less than like $5,000. And you got a week to do it. And it took the guy like maybe 2 weeks, but he figured out how to make this radio and to do it like for $6,000. So it's like a huge savings for SpaceX. They figured out how to make it. And maybe Scott can talk about this, but I think the way Tesla thinks about costs is like what's the cost of the atoms, and so like servos and actuators may be pretty expensive now because they're not mass produced, but how can we make them the cheapest? So I think eventually they can get it to like $5,000 is the cost of Tesla. I just look at the materials, the cost of the materials, and if you can make a car that has 10,000 parts, I think you could figure out how to make the arms, how to get it to a certain precision. But I'm curious what Scott thinks about this.
I think the way you look at it is there's two components in there. There's a hardware component and a software component. And the software component is sort of one extreme of what's going on when you are looking at any sort of manufacturing that's going on. So if you look at Microsoft, all the cost of that software is a development cost. It's not the manufacturing cost. We know the manufacturing distribution is practically free, yet we know their software isn't free. Why is that? Because of all the development of being able to come up with that. And then there's the other extreme of manufacturing. While most of manufacturing is actually the cost of your production lines, the materials, everything you got to go in there, and there's a little bit of R&D that you have. So but that's kind of small compared to that. So those are sort of the two different extremes. What is TeslaBot? Is it software or is it hardware? It's kind of a combination of the two. So I see in the very beginning, there's been a lot of cost in developing that thing. So the first one or two that come off, you're going to be able to say, that thing cost $500,000 or $1 million to build, just because you have to amortize the cost of all that R&D. But once you've solved that problem of how to actually control this and how to make it smart and how to be able to do all these tasks, those costs just go down. Like you say, it comes down to the cost of the atoms at that point.
The one thing I will throw in that might give us a little bit of an indication is, although it's not perfect, is the cost of full self-driving, right? So, I mean, you're purchasing a $50,000 car, whatever, but then they're like, if you want full self-driving, it's an extra $12,000. And so do they give you the Tesla bot, but if you want it to perform a bunch of tasks, you're going to have to subscribe to the kitchen task or the laundry task or the factory task if you're a factory person, so like I feel like they have ways where they can charge for the hardware almost separately from the software. There's kind of a base OS that's included with the price, and maybe that's $20,000 or $25,000. But then if you want the Tesla bot to do more and more stuff, then you got to pay for it. Just as a guess, based on the fact that the full self-driving costs extra and is not included in the cars.
I want to pull up the picture of the invitation that they sent, because one of the things that I noticed from that was that the hands look kind of complex. And I'm curious to hear y'all's opinion on that, since we have some experts on here. Right. And if Google Images would play nice just for once.
Scott and I had, by the way, to plug my channel, if anybody's interested, a couple of days ago, Scott and I had over an hour discussion about the hands. So definitely check that out. We get into it.
Actually, more about the wrist than the hand.
Yeah, about the wrists. I mean, it was just this.
Just the wrist. The fingers, that's something else. That is something else.
Let's see. Okay.
I highly recommend that video. That was really good.
So here we go. So maybe give us like a crash course as far as what y'all saw. And the bigger thing for me is, what does this mean as far as material costs and the sort of manufacturing processes that have to be put in place to make this scalable? Like, is this a thing that we're going to have to, does it require multiple years of innovation to get it to a point where they can crank? I guess ultimately what I'm trying to get to is, how many bots per year in 2030? Like, that's ultimately where my head goes to. Is it 1,000? Is it 1 million? Is it 10 million? Is it 100 million? And at what cost? And I feel like this picture might have some clues. So maybe give us a little bit of a rundown.
Certainly the bill of materials is going to be far less than a car, just because it's not as much stuff in there. But I'll let Scott, because Scott, you're the expert in this area, so you take it.
Well, I've always felt that the one thing that's limiting the Tesla bot is the AI, or the software, the brains, and the hand. Everything else in between is kind of been a solved problem. So in many ways, that hand is probably what limits your production. If they're able to crank that out very easily, everything else is fairly easy to manufacture. And a lot of it, of course, is how much it's able to do is going to come down to how complex or the dexterity you're able to get out of that hand. So there's a lot of keys there. It seems like the design is fairly simple. And there was one comment in our video, John, that I thought was rather interesting. It might be insightful. They thought that one side of it was CGI rendered and the other side is real. And that's why they're not exactly mirrors and a little bit different. I'm like,
So which is
what
which
do you
then?
think now? So
I don't even know which is which in that case.
yeah, I don't know which is which. And I've always felt that there are some parts in there that have been redacted that we can't see to figure out what's going on. We focused a lot on the wrist. The wrist mechanism seems to be fairly simple. What you're seeing down in the corners are these two cylinders with a piston in there that are pushing back and forth. And when they both push together, it causes the hand to go up and down like this, what we call a pitching motion. If one of them goes in the opposite direction to the other, you get this yawing motion back and forth. And that's not as an important a motion. It's kind of limited, but it's limited with our normal hands. And that's about right. And it goes up and down. And by deciding to do it that way, it looks like they put all the mechanics behind the wrist where you want them, because you want the wrist to be very thin and not to have servos and everything else crowding that space so you can get your other services through there that you need for the fingers. What they're doing inside the hand, we haven't quite figured out, where the power is coming in, where the motors are. Are they in there for the fingers, or are they somehow having these tendons, what look like tendons in here, come all the way back to the wrist? And then there's this big box that we can't quite figure out what it's there for, because it seems to be rather bulky and getting in the way. But in that video, we do show mechanically how the wrist would work. The fingers are a bit interesting because they've changed some things. If you look at your hand or your fingers, they're made up of 3 separate bones. The proximal, the distal, and the one in the middle, which is called the middle. And what they've done is the proximal is a little bit longer than it is for us. And they've fused together the middle and the distal and have already built a little bit of an arch in there. So it looks like they've dropped one knuckle in there to sort of simplify the whole thing.
Right. And one other thing is that Chinese article that we saw today, I think Bradford, you put that online. But if you look at this picture, it's really hard to tell if there are 2 digits plus a thumb on each hand, or 3 or 4.
3 or 4.
And it was interesting that Elon talked about having 10 fingers in that article. So I was like, maybe there are, but it's also possible there might just be like 1 or 2 little fingers and like a mitten or something. So it's a very interesting image that
very interesting, yeah. But the fingers are not exactly the same as the human finger.
No. And there's a major complexity savings by not having that extra little joint in the fingers, which is fairly useless anyway. I mean, again, I think, Scott, you talk about this a lot, but if you're picking up a power tool, you just need to be able to grip it and pull the trigger. You don't have to have any kind of crazy, you don't have to play the piano or the guitar or anything like that. You just have to be able to pick up a power tool.
If you're not playing the piano or the guitar, you don't really need the pinky. I think the only of the reasons for the pinky that was come up with is connecting the dots. Said you need it to be able to palm a basketball. You might need it to be able to throw a pass. You don't need it for drinking tea. So is it 4?
The British would disagree.
Yeah. Oh, you need it for drinking tea, or that is actually an important part of drinking tea?
Both, I guess, maybe.
British think it's important.
Yeah.
So then within the context of, like, maybe we end the stream this way. So how do we think about, like, if you were to guess how many units they produce by 2030, or are you not comfortable making that guess? Like, do we have enough information within what we've talked about so far, the message that we saw in the blog post today? Like, if you were to guess by 2030, how many of these we would have coming out of a Tesla factory? Like, what do you think?
Use the Tesla ramp up already. We're talking about starting out with a couple of hundred, maybe this year, maybe 1,000 next year, and you start doing it. How long did it take Tesla to get to 1 million units?
So from Roadster to 1 million? 13 years? 14 years?
Yeah.
Something like that?
I don't think it'll take that long. I honestly think it's going to be battery constrained again. Even though it'll use a lot less batteries, it looks like this is aluminum or possibly stainless steel, nothing super complex. no space age materials. So all of it should be, once they figure out how to manufacture it, that should go pretty quickly. So a lot of it'll be batteries.
Yeah, it probably take the Tesla ramp up and factor of 2 on it.
Okay.
Because it is much simpler. There's no doubt about it. Once they have cracked the code, they will be able to crank these things out so fast. And not only will one factory they'll be able to have factories all over the planet doing this. It's not going to be like setting up a gigafactory. And I don't see any really super complex manufacturing components need like a gigapress.
And for a long time, you're not sending these out to the wild. They're in the factory. So if something goes wrong with them, you can fix them there.
So
you don't have to really worry about what they look like. So if they're imperfect and have panel gaps, or someone said shoulder gaps, it really doesn't matter. They can put them to work even if they don't look like a perfect Tesla bot. I think there's some things where it's not as limited. So yeah, I'm real curious to see where this goes.
It'll probably be self-limiting. They would be able to crank them out at a really high volume in just a couple of years. It's just a question of whether they want to, whether the demand is there, and whether they've decided it's mature enough.
Yeah.
So in that case, do you think it'll be software limited? That's interesting. I mean, all of this is predicated on the fact that the software gets good enough that the robot can do useful tasks, right? If all it can do is stand there, you're going to make a few and it'll be interesting. But so I think we have full self-driving, like the actual capability to do, like, let's say level 4, and Tesla bot are really in lockstep. That, like, if you solve one of those, the other one is going to be solved, and then it just comes down to how fast they can crank them out.
Right. They solved the Model 3 before they solved FSD, and maybe with the Tesla bot, they solve the mechanics of what it should be first, way before they get the software. And then it's just a question that each Tesla bot keeps on getting better and better. And maybe there's going to be, version 2 of it. There's definitely going to be like a couple of prototypes that they go through, but that will probably happen in a very short time frame. And I think by 2025, you're probably starting to see them being very serious about it.
And Farzad, I think, I mean, certainly hardware 4. So hardware 3 is what's in Teslas right now, the full self-driving hardware. Hardware 4 is definitely going to be the basis for Optimus, but it is quite possible also that they might skip right over to hardware 5. So, they may try to get the maximum amount of compute power for the minimum amount of energy, because batteries are going to be an issue for this because it's pretty small. So, you can't sit there and run a 100 or 200 watt, computer that's just constantly drawing that kind of power for it to operate. So the lower power they can go, the better.
Interesting. Bradford, go ahead.
I think one risk is maybe Tesla tries to bite off too much at first. So, like, I really hope they limit to the factory, limit to that type of setting, and not try and make it super complicated at first. So I think there's some risks in the approach. So provided, and I'm not saying what I'm suggesting is the right approach, but provided they go down the right path, starting right out, it could happen and ramp, faster than we think. And there's a lot of manufacturing jobs that are needed out there.
Yeah.
You're going to really disappoint Warren Redlick, though. He really, really wants one. So I'm just telling you that. He's going to be very unhappy to hear that.
It's going to come. It just takes a little time to mature.
There was a funny question earlier. Sanju Bajaj asked it, is like, okay, so let's say the robot's really good and makes life like way better for humanity. One reason why people have a lot of babies is to for someone to take care of them late in life. So, like, indirectly, would a successful humanoid robot cause a lower reproduction rate? And I think it's possible. There's a lot of cultures where people, do have more children, so that there's someone to take care of for them late in life.
Yeah, but it could have the opposite effect. that a lot of
Just make
people are
life so
putting
good
off
and make
having
things
kids just
optimistic.
because they can't afford it, or that they get their career started and everything else. And it may turn around the other way. That's suddenly, wow, we actually can have kids and we can be there with our kids.
Ooh, I like
Yeah.
that. You
Yeah,
should end it
that's
there
where my
with
head
it.
goes. That's where my head goes. As long as we have that future where that couple has jobs to like work and be able to make an income from, right?
Or
Which,
the thing we haven't touched
yeah.
on, which is universal basic income. But
Right.
I don't know how satisfied people are going to be by that. But I don't know. It would be nice, I guess, to get a paycheck every month, no matter what. That'd be pretty nice. So I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that can have its whole other discussion. But all right, we're at 90 minutes. What a discussion. This was the quickest 90 minutes ever. You wanted guitar, so I'm going to play you a little bit of guitar. Okay, so if you
Yes.
want to stick around for a couple minutes, I'm going to hook this up. Let's see what it sounds like. Feel free to talk amongst yourselves while I do this.
Should we discuss
We have
how
the air guitar.
the Holy Roman Empire is neither holy nor Roman?
See.
Since we're discussing.
I don't know about drumming.
Gosh, I've been watching. Does anybody know Rick Beato? He does a music channel. Farzad, you'd probably love him if you don't know him. It's
Rick who?
Rick Beato. He has a very popular channel that I
Sounds
came across.
familiar.
Yeah. Anyway, he's just really, really good at analyzing songs and everything. It's very, very.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Right.
I have heard
With like
that,
the white hair.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about. He's great.
Yeah, he's pretty amazing.
Yeah.
So he's been playing guitar in the videos I've been watching. So the bar is very high for.
Don't expect that. Don't expect that level of professionalism. Yeah. It's funny because we've been so we started a band not too long ago. Because I hadn't, my career went crazy for about, 10 years. And I hadn't picked up my guitar since then. And the one thing that was really nice about sort of pursuing my passions now, having the financial independence, was now this thing's getting a lot more attention. For the last 10 years, I haven't touched a damn thing. And I finally got the time to sit down and play again. So it's been super cool to get back to my musical side and start playing shows. We had our first show a couple of weeks ago. We were awful, but it was so fun. It's one of those things where you go out there and play again and it feels great. So don't expect excellence. Okay, this isn't like a virtuoso experience. Maybe we'll play a riff or two and see if you guys can guess the song. How about that? Maybe something like that. Okay. You can hear me now, right?
Yes.
On the
Yes.
microphone?
Your voice.
Okay, let's see if I can get this sounding here. 1 second, please. Guitar, properties.
I had to find that app on my phone that identifies the tune.
I'm actually just thinking about Tesla Bot. I don't think it's going to do real well without the ability to bend the last little knuckle. It could just do chords. We can't hear you, Farzad. Sorry. Yeah.
No.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, maybe it can do accompaniment guitar. So it'll just play basic chords. Nothing crazy.
How about now?
We can
Yes.
hear you now. Yeah.
Okay, nice.
By the way, I really love the comments, reading the comments. Okay. There we go.
Yeah?
A little bit of metal.
A little bit of reverb,
Heard
a little bit of
some.
echo. Yeah.
Okay. Technical difficulties. 1 second, y'all.
In all fairness, he didn't know this was going to happen, so he didn't
No,
prepare
no,
ahead
no.
of time to do a sound check or anything. 30 seconds before.
Yeah.
Wow. The nice beat echo thing going on.
Let's see. There we go. That should work.
Someone had a quote I want to share. It's foreseeable that with the power of robots, we will create an era of extreme abundance of goods and services where everyone can live a life of abundance. That would
And
be
we can-
pretty sweet.
All learn to play the guitar. That would be nice.
Have time for that. Yeah.
Yeah. that'd be cool.
Perhaps the only scarcity that will exist in the future is for us to create ourselves as humans. And that's what Elon said in the article today.
Yes, that's right. Yep. We really did put Farzad on the spot here. There we
Oh,
go.
that's good.
Oh, that's good.
Yep.
Perfect.
Oh, I know what's going on. I was wondering what was going on. I think my master was. There we go. Okay, how's that sound coming through?
Very good.
Good?
Yeah.
Okay, let's see if you know this riff. Ready?
Come on, Georgia. It's very close. Right next door. Should we start singing?
Please.
Sweet Home Alabama.
Sweet home.
Actually, I was expecting like Smoke on the Water or something like that, because that's always the beginner one, right? You know?
Are you guys Metallica fans? Do you guys know any Metallica?
Sure.
Yes.
Yeah? All right. Here we go. Actually, we're going heavier here.
Whoa.
Any of you guys like Stranger Things? You guys know the
Oh, yeah.
Stranger
Yes.
Things show?
Love
I
it.
just finished up. Thank you.
Nice.
Right.
Yeah.
When you said Stranger Things, I thought you were going to go to Running Up That Hill, and I was like, well, that's interesting.
Yeah.
There's no guitar in there.
I was expecting for y'all to start singing that one.
Yeah.
That's when you guys come in. Yeah. Oh man,
Well, this
such
made,
fun.
this made my week. I really enjoyed this.
Yeah,
Thank you,
likewise.
Farzad.
Thank you so much for coming
Yeah,
on,
thank you.
everybody. Really appreciate the
was awesome.
discussion. I think it's one of those discussions that it makes me feel like we're in the future now, because these were things that weren't previously discussed. You know, like nobody's talking about, oh, what are bots going to do? What's automation going to do to the future? And the fact that we follow this company now that's getting into that realm, it feels like the future is here now. And in about a month and a half, we're going to get a
Right.
show and tell in how the future is going to change. So it's fascinating to follow. And thank you very much for joining me in this discussion. And thank you, Bradford, for really starting the discussion on Saturday with that space. Because, man, once I heard that, I'm like,
absolutely.
boy, we need to continue this discussion big time. So
Right.
every single one of you is welcome back anytime. I'd love to continue this discussion in the future as well. Bradford, keep hosting those spaces because they're super, super helpful. And yeah, I don't know if y'all have any last words, but I had a lot of fun and I thought it was a very valuable discussion for me as well because I learned a lot. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah.
That was awesome.
Thank you,
All right.
Farzad.
Yeah.
All right, everybody. We'll call it a day. Very much. Thank you very much. Like, subscribe, share, whatever. I don't know. I'm not a professional YouTuber. Do whatever you want. All right. Take it easy, everybody.
Yeah, right.
Disco.